A very common question I get is, how do I transform my idea that lives in my head into a polished script that I can show around? And that's what I want to help you with today. I am going to talk about process, and I'm going to give you some tools as to how to get those ideas out of your head and onto the page. Because sometimes it's harder than it seems. It's not exactly the same as writer's block. Writer's block, I feel, is when we don't have ideas or things don't excite us. There's another specific problem that I notice it's a very common problem, is that people have these really good ideas and strong ideas and ideas they're passionate about, but the moment they sit down to write, nothing comes out. And that's very common. And that's not something that should discourage you from writing. Instead, I'm going to give you some tools. Okay, I'm going to give you some tools. That's all. This channel is all about that, right? Tools for your toolbox. I say that in almost every video. So here we go. Sometimes what happens is that our idea is a little murky, or we think we have a clearer sense of story than we do. And then when we sit down to write, we realize that we only have snippets of the idea. It's way less on the paper than it's in our head, right? You go for a walk with your dog and you're like, oh my gosh, the whole script is in my head. And then you open a final draft and turns out it's not. The first thing I want to tell you, and I want you to keep in mind, is that we really don't want to just open final draft and start writing, not knowing exactly where we're going. It is very, very important to outline the story we want to tell before we tell it. And I will give you kind of the path to that. The first tool I want you to use before you're thinking about opening your computer or writing anything down are index cards or flashcards. You all know what they look like, right? They're good old-fashioned index cards, right? The ones I have here, they don't have lines on them, but that's just what I happen to get. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Index cards are really your best friend when you're starting to write. I cannot emphasize enough. I spend so much time on my index cards before I even open up Word or Google Docs or Final Draft or whatever your next step is going to be. And I'm going to show you different ways you can use your index cards. The first, and I think most common and obvious way to use them is to use them for scene ideas. A very, very common way that I've noticed through my years of teaching that ideas start coming up to people is through snippets of a story. You might have a little idea here, you might have a little idea over there, right? And that's where index cards are really useful. So I'm just going to give you some examples, and then I'm going to show you how we can slowly use them and advance your story with index cards. So this is an index cards, okay? This is my index card. This is like my blank. Obviously, this is my blank pile over here. So let's say I have an idea for one of my opening scenes. Might not be my opening scene, okay? So let's just say character goes for a jog. Let's name our character Joe. So Joe goes for a jog, okay? Joe goes for a jog. Okay. It's written down now, guys. It exists in the world, okay? So we're going to just put that here on our table, on our whiteboard, if you're a whiteboard person, okay? Okay, now we have my magically appearing whiteboard here in the back, also a very good tool for writing, and I will show you how. If you don't have a whiteboard, that's okay. You could always use your table, the floor, whatever works for you. Joe goes for a jog, right? I know that that's one of my opening scenes. Maybe I'm establishing Joe's routine, that he's a runner or he's starting to run, whatever it is that you want to do. So I'm going to put my scene right here. Okay. Now the scene exists. It's out of my head. It's a first step. Okay. So index cards, this is a first use for them. You can start giving ideas of snippets. So let's say Joe finishes a race. Okay. Joe finishes a race, and I know, just based on my instincts as a storyteller, that this is closer to the end of the movie, okay? So I can actually place my card closer, like to the bottom of the board, okay? So what are some other scenes that I might have in my running story that I'm just coming up with right now? Maybe there's a classic training montage, okay? Montage. I don't know exactly how the montage is going to be. I don't know where it's going to be, and that's totally fine, okay? We're going to just put that here. And slowly, I'm starting to get ideas out of my head. Notice that they're not detailed, they're not super textured or nuanced, and that's fine. It's wherever your process is at. There's something quite magical that happens once you start forcing yourself to get ideas off your head and onto the page. And a really good way to do that is not going directly to the page, but going to cards. Okay. So we can slowly start thinking of our scenes. We can start kind of filling in the gaps. I really like to do it by acts. Okay. I like to do it like this, as so. I will usually do act 1 up here. Act 1. Okay. And act 1, you should kind of like maybe use 1 line, maybe a line and a half of cards. Act 2, right? And then your very short act 3. That's what you just start building out your story. Okay. Another thing you can use cards for, if they're not exactly scenes, you can just have this like idea. Let's say your character loves LaCroix. Okay. Character loves LaCroix. So you just write Joe loves LaCroix. It's not a scene yet. It's just, I don't know why I thought of that, guys. It's so random. But like, that is something that I want to show about my character, is that he loves LaCroix. So I'm just going to write, I don't know if you can see there. Okay. And then I'm just kind of going to leave it here at the side because I don't know exactly where that is going to be in my scene. Maybe it's something that I have to dramatize. It means like, I know that he likes LaCroix. What is the scene that I'm going to write in order to show that to my audience without being obvious, right? That's called dramatizing your character. So, right, that's something there. So this is a really good idea for index cards. I also like color coding my index cards to see who, like one for each character or each subplot, right? And then I can see visually where things are kind of concentrated. So if you have, for example, character A is blue. Okay, character, I forgot how to write today. And maybe character B is pink. Okay. And then when you you have your little cheat, right? Like that. And then you can do little codes on each of your cards. So let's say that I have a scene in which Joe gets his gear for a race. Okay. And let's say Joe is blue and his romantic interest is pink, not to be like gender conforming. Hey, maybe Joe's interest is a guy. I'm just saying that the character is pink. Okay. The character's code is pink in my beat sheet, in my little whiteboard here. So I could just literally go like do little coloring like so. You see those little dots up there? I know the pink's not registering as much, but then you can visually see who's showing up where. Okay. So you can and you should spend some time on your index cards. You're not wasting time. You're not writing. Sometimes we have to get out of our head of what productivity means. Index cards. Okay. Eventually your goal is to have all the scenes that you want, or at least you can think of right now on your whiteboard or on your table or on the floor or wherever you're going to do that. Definitely indicate what your turning points are. Okay. So that's actually my next topic for today is turning points. If you are a little stuck, okay, it might mean that you don't really know what the dramatic question for your movie is. The dramatic question is that question that is formed by the end of Act 1 that is going to carry us through all of Act 2 until Act 3, and that we're going to wait to see answered. And they're usually very specific. Okay, they're specific questions. Will Brody kill the shark? Will Marlin find his son Nemo? Will Louise from Arrival be able to understand why the aliens have come to Earth? Right? These are the dramatic questions. They are only going to be answered at the end of the movie. So if you're stuck even right here, maybe take a step back and think in terms of the dramatic question. What is your dramatic question? It's a yes or no question that is related to your protagonist. It's related to a protagonist's goal, and you're not going to know that answer until the very end. Will Dirty Dancing lady be able to do the Dirty Dancing famous thingamabob? The famous leap. In romantic comedies or in romance movies is, will the couple be able to be together? Okay. Will character escape from jail? Will character be reunited with their parents? Whatever it is that is the backbone of your story, okay? That is your dramatic question. If you're stuck, if you even can't get to this point, if you only have a few ideas, or if your ideas seem random and not connected, it means you probably don't have a strong dramatic question. As much as I love indie art house movies and I love writing them as well, when we're early on in our writing journey, it's really important to have a concrete dramatic question more than will he be okay or will she able to overcome her trauma. Those are totally valid emotional core stories, but let's think of something specific, a little external that's going to help you write. Okay, it's going to help you write scenes. It's going to help you generate scenes. Okay, so we think we have our dramatic question. We're starting to outline. Okay. Another way to outline, instead of just randomly thinking about scenes, again, guys, tools for your toolbox. Okay. There's no right or wrong way to do this, is the sequence approach. There is a whole video on this channel about the sequence approach. It's a really effective way to plan out your features. It guarantees you that you're always engaged in something, in some kind of subplot or plot. And if you watch that video, and I highly encourage that you do, the sequence is what they do is that they each have their own internal dramatic question that is related to the major dramatic question, right? So when Marty McFly goes back into the past, the dramatic question, the first act dramatic question that's only going to be answered in the end is, will he be able to return to his own timeline without incurring damage, right, in his life? So that's the main dramatic question. Each sequence, however, has its own dramatic question. So for example, the first thing he needs to do is find Doc, right? So the first sequence of Act 2 is, will Marty find Doc? And then a bunch of things happens in that, like in the meantime, right? And then he finds Doc, and that generates a new dramatic question. Will Marty convince Doc that he is in fact from the future and that Doc has to help him, right? So that is a very effective way to plan your story, is to break it down in smaller little stories that each have their own dramatic question. So we think about our scenes. Okay. So you could either think about all of your beats. Okay. Think about your turning points. We have videos about that here. If you want to just think in terms of what's your first act turning point, what's your midpoint. If you have a second act turning point, that's really clear. Maybe you don't. And what's your climax, right? We've covered all of these topics here on the channel. I highly encourage you to check them out if this is your first video, and welcome. I go in really in depth in all these concepts that I'm talking about, but right today I'm talking about process, right? How to get your ideas off the paper. So it might be random scenes. It might be your turning point. You might be someone that likes to think in terms of start to finish. You might be someone that has the overall idea. You know what your ending is. I'm of two minds of knowing what your ending is. Sometimes the ending kind of comes to us as we're writing, but I do find it very important to at least know what the answer to your dramatic question is, even if it's a yes or no. Even if you don't know how your character is going to accomplish their goal, you should at least know from the offset if they're going to reach their goal or not, because characters don't always reach their goals, right? That's totally fine. We just want to see them trying. And we want to see them changing in the process. That's the most satisfying thing. So maybe you start with your beat sheet. Maybe you started with your sequences. I highly encourage the sequence approach, just based on my years of teaching and my own process as a writer. I find that you spend a little bit of time on sequences and you do most of the groundwork of plotting. With sequences, you also guarantee that you don't kind of lose dramatic tension, especially towards the end of your second act. So let's say you do your sequences before your beat sheet, okay? Let's say you did this for a little bit. Now you have enough scenes there. I'm going to do my sequences. Now, by all means, open up your computer. Okay, open up. I would go straight to final draft, and then I would start. This is a very kind of, I don't want to say boring, but tricky and hard part of your writing process. This is the trickiest, is going from sequences or your kind of beat sheet, right? What are beats, right? Beats are just story moments. There are things that happen. That's what a beat means. That's what a beat sheet means. It's a sheet. It's a list of things that you know are going to happen in your story. So the next step, once you have a beat sheet or once you have all your sequences, they might be 8 sequences. That's the norm. They might be 7. They might be 9. They might be 10. Okay. Maybe not more than 10, guys. Movies are way too long. What you're going to do is you're going to kind of translate those beats into specific scenes, or you're going to break down those sequences into specific scenes. Okay. So what that means is you're going to open, maybe I would encourage you opening your final draft at this point, like, so we can kind of skip a step. And in your final draft, start planning out what each of your scenes are. You're not writing those scenes just yet. Okay. We have a video here on scene writing. We are describing what each scene is going to be. A lot of writers at this stage, they already do slug lines, right? We have that here in formatting, the formatting video, which is your scene headings, internal, external, location, day or night. Okay, so that's what our slug lines are. And you might as well just do that already. You open your final draft, interior, Joe's house, day. Joe makes a smoothie in the morning. Exterior, Joe's house, day. Joe's going to go for a run. He might see some neighbors on the way. You're not writing dialogue. You're not over describing your scenes. You're just telling yourself what these scenes are and in what order. And then I encourage you to already use your scene headings, because that's kind of like skipping a step and then you don't have to do that later. Regardless, at one point, you are going to have all of your scenes described in a document. And that might be 3 or 4 pages. It might be 8 or 9 pages. It kind of depends on your style. You might be someone that wants to put all the details up front. You might be someone that just wants to get through it quick and just kind of like writing down what your idea, like what happens in the scene, like very bare bones. There's no right or wrong. It's whatever your style, tools for your toolbox, whatever gets you writing. And then you're going to have all of your scenes in order in a document. And then, my friends, that's when you get to start writing your scenes. I call them opening up your pages. Everyone calls them opening up your pages. You open them up. And now it's time to do all the fun stuff. You're going to write your dialogue, right? This is when you get to write dialogue. You kind of like earn your right to write dialogue. You don't just start writing dialogue. You do a lot of work before you get to that point. And when you get to that point, you know kind of who your characters are, and maybe you're already understanding how they speak a little bit. But again, your first draft that's what it is. It's a first draft. And we call them vomit drafts because you're literally vomiting on the page. Not literally. That would be gross. You're figuratively vomiting your words on the page. You're putting your words on the page. You're writing them without really worry. This is really important. Don't worry about someone reading them. They're not going to read your first draft. They're not going to read anything until you send them to them. So don't worry about it being bad. It's supposed to be bad. It's expected to be bad. That's your perfectionism talking. Right? First drafts suck always. We're never going to shoot a first draft. We're never going to send a first draft to a manager or agent or exec or a competition. Don't do that. It's a waste of everyone's time. Okay. We're going to write a first draft and then we're just going to tell our brains that we finished. It's amazing. We finished. Okay. And now we rewrite. It's a different place in your mind. Once you have your pages down to go and fix them. You fix something that exists. You can't fix something that doesn't exist. So just write the damn thing, right? Just write it. By then, you yourself are going to be able to edit a little bit your own words. Once you have your final draft and you go back, you kind of become a better writer every time you write a draft. So by the time you go back to it, you already have your own notes. And then you keep doing that until you get to a point where you don't know what to fix anymore. You might know something's wrong with it, but you don't know how to fix it. You might think it's great. And that's when we send it to readers. We send it to our close friends. We might pay a little coverage service. You might send them to me. Okay. And then you're going to get notes. And then you're going to take into those notes. You're going to look at those notes. And I have a video on feedback here, right? How to take feedback without losing your mind. You're going to filter those notes. You're going to filter which ones connect, which ones do you connect with, which ones you have the confidence to ignore. Which ones kind of make sense, but not exactly. And then you interpret that and then you take that into heart and then you use those notes to do another pass at your script. Okay. You might look at each plot at a time when you're rewriting. You might look at your script as a whole, whatever works best. I had a teacher that used to tell us to do significant pairs, which means you get all the big pairings or trios of characters in your movie and you read those scenes in order to see how they are progressing outside of the big scope of the script. And then eventually, guys and girls and them and they and everyone in between, you are going to have a polished draft. And then you can send them out to competitions. You can send them out to reading services. You can do whatever you want with them. And hopefully that will be the script that gets your foot in the door. And I've really hope I can help you with that journey. So please subscribe if you haven't already and contact me through the comments. If you have any suggestions for videos, if you have any questions, concerns, please hit me up. Thank you so much.